did wonder where you got that picture of me there, Simon, but it turns out it was actually Anna Levine's album cover. Love that from Anna Levine. Thank you very much. Okay, so to our main event. Anna Bailey, author of Tall Bones, and S.J. Watson, author of several excellent books, but most recently Final Cut. Just to let you know, we have copies of Tall Bones and Final Cut up for grabs. We are spoiling you tonight, more so than usual. If you would like to win either a copy of Steve or Anna's book, or both, to be in it, you've got to be in it to win it. Come up with the title of a crime novel based on the place where you live. Pop the title and a very, very short synopsis. Remember, I'm not going to commission any of these books. Simon's not going to design a cover for them, even if you ask. A title and a 2-line synopsis to the usual email address, baytales20@gmail.com. And we will pick a winner. It won't be at random, it'll be our favourite ones. So if they do make us laugh, you have a better chance of winning. All of our competitions close today, Wednesday the 28th of April at midnight, UK time. So, although I have some questions for Anna and Steve, you two can also ask your questions to them. So, along the bottom, if you're using a laptop, along here somewhere, there should be a Q&A button. If you would like to ask a question of Steve and or Anna, pop it in there and I will do my very best to get those answered for you, okay? But allow me to introduce you to our guests this evening. Anna Bailey was born in Bristol in 1995 and studied creative writing at Bath Spa University. She wanted to become a journalist, but found herself moving to America to become a Starbucks barista instead. She first lived in Corinth, a small town north of Dallas, Texas, before eventually moving to Colorado, where she lived near Estes Park, just outside Rocky Mountain National Park. This inspired the setting for Tall Bones. S.J. Watson's first novel, Before I Go to Sleep, became a phenomenal international success and has now sold over, wait for it, 6 million copies worldwide. I'm sorry, but that deserves a woo! It won the Crime Writers Association Award for Best Debut Novel and the Galaxy National Book Award for Crime Thriller of the Year. The film of the book, starring Nicole Kidman, Colin Firth and Mark Strong, was directed by Rowan Joff and released in September 2014. His second novel, Second Life, a psychological thriller, was published to acclaim in 2015. So I'd like to welcome Anna Bailey and S.J. Watson. So everyone, please give them a huge round of applause. Okay. Steve, I read on Twitter today that it is 10 years today since Before I Go to Sleep was published. Do you have any advice for Anna or any other debut novelist who's out there?
Well, Anna, I don't know if it's relevant. I was going to say don't drink as much as I did at your launch party, because tomorrow is the 10-year anniversary of the worst hangover I've ever had. I don't know. I mean, enjoy it, I suppose, really. And I mean, Anna's book is already a bestseller, so what advice can I really offer? Don't read reviews. That's some advice I learned a bit too late, if anything. Don't read reviews. The sooner you can give up reading reviews, the better.
Okay. And do you still stick with that now?
Yes.
And is that the thing you wish somebody had told you 10 years ago?
No, well, no, because I don't know. I think when you have a big success, this is going to sound like I'm complaining. I'm not complaining. It's very much a luxury problem to have, but I think it can throw you when you come to write your next book, because suddenly you're just very aware of your audience. Whereas I think when you write your debut, your audience is very sort of, well, mostly fantasy or it's kind of hypothetical or theoretical or whatever, but suddenly these people become real to you. And I think if you're not careful, that can kind of throw you a little bit. So I can't remember what the question was now. Have I answered it? Was there a question?
Yes, you have. You absolutely have. Thank you. Anna, congratulations. As Steve said, you are a bestseller. How does it feel?
Thank you. It's totally unreal. Yeah, I still can't really, it's absolutely amazing. I still can't really believe that.
Excellent. Okay, so Anna, could you tell us a little bit more about your journey to publication, please?
So I like you said at the opening there, I wrote this book really inspired by the time that I spent living in America, which, like, I had the opportunity to go to the US, and I was really looking, I guess I was really looking for like space out there. I had like kind of a hard time in the UK, struggling with my sexual identity, and I was really looking for like a space to kind of discover myself. And I definitely had a lot of space in America. It's these absolutely huge, evocative landscapes, especially in Colorado. Really like beautiful, brutal places, but they really sort of, it also emphasized like how small and isolated a lot of the communities are out there. There was a lot of prejudice and very close-minded thinking, and sort of nobody making an effort to kind of educate themselves on the wider world. So you felt very cut off when you were there, and that to me just felt like the perfect setting for a mystery novel, somewhere where, you know, there's something wrong, but nobody on the outside of this community knows that, and people within the inside aren't making any effort to expose it. And I felt that would have been a really interesting setting for a novel. So once I came back from the US and I had time and more kind of freedom to write something, I knew that was what I wanted.
Excellent, thank you. And Steve, I'm going to ask you to cast your mind back to before I go to sleep. What was it like for you on your journey to publication?
Gosh, it was it was so strange, because I wrote a lot of before I go to sleep on a writing course with the Faber Academy, and so it felt very I felt very supported, and I suppose looking back, I think it's probably the first time I'd ever written anything that wasn't autobiographical, and I think I was aware that I was writing the best thing I'd ever written, and that combining that with doing a writing course in the Faber Academy, it's probably the best shot I'd have at getting published. But it still felt very sort of like theoretical. Like, again, it still felt very sort of like an unattainable dream, because I think when you're an aspiring, I don't know what your experience is, Anna, but when you're an aspiring writer, you just get so much negative. Not feedback, that's not quite the right word, but you get so much negativity about the publishing process and how to, I mean, it is difficult. I'm not saying it's really easy and everyone can do it. It is difficult, but I think the idea that I might one day, you know, in 10 years time be sitting here chatting about the debut book that I wrote, and as you say, you know, to having sold so many copies and being turned into a film, it just felt like an impossible thing, not even worth thinking about in those terms. So you know, I remember when I saw the person who is now my agent, you know, when I saw Claire for the first time and she was talking to me about it, it still felt very like, oh, she seems to like it. I mean, this is strange, you know. Maybe one day I might see it being published. But the thought that it would catch on the way it did was really amazing. So it was quite a ride, really. Yeah, it was a very strange and wonderful and scary experience.
Excellent. Now I'm just going to have give a quick synopsis of both books for anybody who hasn't heard of them or read the back of them or anything like that. So Anna Bailey's book, Tall Bones. When 17-year-old Abigail goes missing, her best friend Emma, driven by the guilt of leaving her alone at the Tall Bones party that night, sets out to find the truth about what happened. As the details unfold, fear and rage surface. Nobody is left unscathed. The festering secrets and long-standing resentment of Abigail's family and the whole community of Whispering Ridge, Colorado, begin to surface with devastating consequences. And final cut, it used to be a buzzing seaside destination, but now, ravaged by the effects of dwindling tourism and economic downturn, it's a ghost town, and the perfect place for filmmaker Alex to shoot her new documentary. But the community is deeply suspicious of her motives. After all, nothing exciting ever happens in Blackwood Bay, or does it? Now, I'd like to ask both of you, do you think your stories would work in different settings? Steve?
I don't know. That's a really interesting one. I mean, when I read Anna's book, when I read Tall Bones, I was quite struck by setting. because I think, I don't know, it's certainly something I was trying to do when I wrote Final Cut. Was I always loved books, and Anna's book definitely is one in which setting is a really important, it feels almost like a character. And that was something that I really wanted to do. So, you know, in Blackwood Bay, although fictional, I wanted it to feel real. And an early reader once said to me that they felt like they could get on a train and go and visit and have a look around. And that was a really important and nice compliment to receive. So it was definitely set in a specific, albeit fictional, but a specific place. But I think a lot of the themes in it are kind of, I mean, it's difficult to talk about that, giving things away, but a lot of the kind of themes in it are quite, they could take place anywhere, and they do take place anywhere. So the fact it's in a dwindling seaside town is not that important to some of the themes in the book. But yeah, it's it was very important to me that the setting felt real and was an important part of it.
Thank you. And how about you, Anna? Do you think this would have worked in a city, for example?
It's a really good question. I think I know, like, when I did the Curtis Brown creative writing course before I got published, and that was actually how I met my agent. And my tutor on the course, I remember her reading the first few chapters and saying she felt it wasn't important that it took place in the US and it could have taken place anywhere. But I honestly don't know. Like, I think it's a really interesting question, to be honest. But I know that I really imbued it with so much of my like personal experience of living in a really isolated mountain town where you feel very cut off from everybody. So I definitely feel like it would have to take place in a very rural setting, which similarly to Steve's book, really in this sense of somewhere that has become cut off and is kind of dying. And I think you don't get that so much in a more urban location. So I think that is quite important. Definitely to the setting of the novel.
Absolutely. So did you start with the stories that you explored, or was setting, or did it all come together at once, do you think? Sorry, Anna, I was referring to you there. I'm just sitting
I always feel like I should let Steve go.
I mean, for me, I don't know, I suppose characters and story it came at once, really. I mean, Blackwood Bay is very, very heavily based on a real place called Robin Hood's Bay in North Yorkshire, and I find that place so kind of spooky and unusual and you know, kind of fairly unique in terms of its layout, because you feel fairly cut off there because it's a tiny fishing village and it's very steep. The roads are very steep, which means there aren't many cars around. So it is kind of like going back in time. So the setting with that place, that real place, is very evocative, and I kind of wanted to set it. I think because my first two books have been very urban, they've been very city-based, I did want to move into a kind of more rural countryside place. So yeah, it all kind of came together, really. I think it wasn't the setting first, but I kind of, it just felt right straight away when I thought, yeah, I want to set a book there, and actually the story I'm writing would work there. It all kind of just happened at the same time.
And Anna, yours, because it was based on your own experience of where you'd lived in the US and stuff, did everything sort of coalesce at once and become this story?
Yeah, I think I knew I really wanted to set something in Colorado in so I lived near this town called Estes Park, which does feature a little bit in the novel, but the town in this book is very much based on that place, like this little town tucked away right in the Rocky Mountains. And I knew I really wanted to set something there, but I kind of had this short story that I'd written when I was a student, which was called Tall Bones, and it was about a mother whose daughter was missing and how she was sort of coping with that, with these two sons that she had. And I got an absolutely awful grade for it. It was really bad. But I really, really loved, I liked the idea of that, of looking at a person's disappearance but telling it more from the perspective of the family that's left behind, rather than focusing on the sort of police investigation into it. And so I kind of carried these characters with me for a long time. And after I came back from the States, I felt like maybe this is finally the setting to put them into. Maybe this is finally the kind of story for them to be involved with. So I was glad I got to use them in the end.
Excellent, thank you. Identity is really strong in Final Cut and Tall Bones. How do you both go about getting into your characters' heads? So obviously we have multiple viewpoints in Tall Bones. So we have Abby, Noah, Jude.
Loads of them.
Yeah. Samuel, but particularly, I mean, I really loved Rat because he was the outsider and he was kind of the underdog, and he was vilified by the other townspeople. So how do you manage to get into all of those different mindsets and make them believable, Anna?
Well, so one thing that I'm doing at the moment, which I did do a little when I was writing Tall Bones, is I lie on the floor and I kind of read lines between my characters, doing like really bad accents, which doesn't sound very professional.
It's great fun.
It's a lot of fun, and I do find that it allows me to be kind of natural with it and to get more of a rhythm of how people actually talk, I suppose, when I'm thinking like less self-consciously about it, and I kind of come up with a lot of conversations that people could have and then take away from that stuff that would be interesting to read in a book. But honestly, most of it just comes from reading a lot, to be honest. Like Samuel, for example, in the book The Missing Girl's Father, is a 62-year-old Vietnam veteran, which I am obviously not. So I just read a lot about the experience of Vietnam War veterans, and hopefully that's an accurate portrayal. But yeah, I think like with anything, it's about doing research for what you're writing about.
I don't know any Vietnam War vets, but he did seem particularly, true to me. Steve, same question to you. How do you manage to get into the minds of your characters?
It's a really tricky one. I don't lie on the floor and have conversations with them.
Why not?
Well, maybe I will start. Actually, it might be a kind of shortcut. It's kind of a slow process to me. They have to feel real. Mm-hmm. They have to feel like they are, obviously they're real people that I could sort of that I would recognize on the street, and I can take them to any, if I'm going to, I don't know, a restaurant. I mean, lately lockdown hasn't helped with this, but sort of like going to a restaurant or something, I would kind of know how they would react and what. It's funny because a lot of writing courses and a lot of advice that you read about writing will say, you have to be able to answer questions about what color underwear they wear and where they went to school and all that kind of stuff. But I think it's about something deeper than that. It's about something kind of understanding the way they see the world and what their kind of faults are and what their kind of default defense mechanism and all those kind of quite deep things. So I think the way I know when I've got a character, when I've got under a character's skin, or maybe a character's got under my skin is a better point, I'm not sure, but is when I can do those questionnaires, when I can answer the questions about, do they write with a pen or a pencil, what's their favorite restaurant or whatever, when I can answer those questions and it feels like I know them so well, it just comes easy. So it's I suppose, what am I trying to say? It's kind of going from the inside out rather than the outside in.
Yeah.
But it's just a process of like, as you said, Anna, if you're writing about someone very different from you, it is just doing research. I mean, I get asked quite a lot about writing from women's points of view. It's to me, it's not such a big deal. That's not such a big deal because I don't think men and women are that different. It's more about, if I'm writing from the point of view of someone who's an addict, for example, as I was in Second Life, then trying to understand what an addict feels and experiences if they're trying to conquer their addiction, and with both Before I Go to Sleep and with Final Cut, it's trying to understand what somebody who has lost part of their own history, or misremembered part of their own history, what's that like, so, and I think, but I think it's just, for me, I can just tell when I know a character well enough to write them.
I think it's, sorry, Nick, carry on.
Yeah, go on.
No.
I think it's almost like if you were writing a biography about somebody, you would get to know them as well as you possibly could before you started writing something. And that's, I think, how it feels with characters. You have to feel that you really, really know them before you start, or not even necessarily before you start, but certainly before you get 90,000 words down about them. Otherwise, you know, if a real life person doesn't really want to talk to you, then it's going to be very difficult for you to write about them. And I think that's true of characters as well. You have to create some kind of relationship between the two of you before you can really write about them accurately, I think.
Excellent. And with regards to the nuts and bolts of writing, do you guys stick to a routine? Do you have the obvious question that everybody gets asked, do you plot or do you pants? And how much research do you do? So Anna, how about you?
I do like to plot quite a lot. I think I don't always stick to the plots that I come up with, but I think that's important to go off script as much as you can. But I do like to know roughly where I'm going. Otherwise, I just write absolute twaddle for days.
And how do you go about? How do you plot? Is it handwritten? Is it a spreadsheet? Is it a flowchart?
I did most of the plotting for Tall Bones on these like little sort of post-its that I put all over the floor, and it covered like the whole length of the living room. And then my cat came and sat on it and rearranged things. But that's the order things ended up in the book. So he
knows what he's doing.
Yeah. With the book I'm writing now, it's a lot more. I have a different cat who is a lot more aggressive with moving things around. So I tend to keep things on my laptop. But yeah, so.
And Steve?
Well, I'm wondering if I could borrow your cat Anna, actually.
He's dead, unfortunately.
Oh no, sorry.
That's right.
Oh dear. Okay, right.
Moving on.
Moving on, yeah. Yeah, it's my process is kind of changing. I'm getting less of a pantser and more of a plotter with each book. So before I go to sleep, it was I think partly because I wrote it on the course.
Yeah.
And maybe actually because, so that therefore felt like I had a safety net. I felt kind of free to just kind of start and see where it ended up and see where it took me. But now with each book, I'm starting to plan more. So the book I'm writing at the moment is I've actually got quite a quite a detailed plan, but I think like Anna, I have to allow myself to deviate from it. And the difficulty then for me then is knowing when actually I've deviated so far, I need to put the brakes on and look at the plan again. But I think it's important for me to have that kind of safety net. So I can't remember who it was, unfortunately, but I do a book club on Twitter, and somebody quite recently said something like, I'm obviously paraphrasing and probably misremembering, but you wouldn't start decorating a room before you build the house. And I think that's kind of what I've realised is very true. I need to feel that I've got the scaffolding of the story in place, and then I can start sort of building the structure. But I think if I'm not one of those people who plans everything really, really rigidly and then just writes it, because I think I'd find it too boring. I think I'd be like, well, I know the story now, so what's the point?
So are you using post-it notes on the living room floor too?
No, I'm now a spreadsheet user, so I've got a big spreadsheet. I never thought I would say, but yeah, I mean, the idea of post-it notes is much more kind of appealing to my sense of aesthetics, but actually it doesn't really work. So.
I love it when we have guests on and they have like a murder board behind them with like string going everywhere and stuff. Oh, it's just brilliant. We have a question from the lovely Alison Barrow, who you two know is your publicist. Alison would like to know what you learned about yourselves in writing these novels. So, Anna.
I learned I'm gay.
You learned this while writing the novel.
No, I think I really learned that I can. This is going to sound so sort of obvious, but like I always wanted to be a writer ever since I was a little girl, and like Steve was saying at the beginning, it's not so much a negativity, but you do get this kind of you know, people telling you like, well, just so you know, like this doesn't really happen for people, so don't get too excited about it. And so for me, I guess it was just a really big deal to be able to finish writing a novel, and to know that I could do that, even if nobody ever read it and it never got published. Just to know that I was capable of finishing writing something was really important to me, and I think made me feel a lot better about myself as a person.
Oh, that's so lovely, and you have done it, and it's gone to be insanely successful. So you've not only done it, you've done it incredibly well. So, and it is a fantastic book. Steve, what did you learn about yourself in writing Final Cut?
Oh God, in writing Final Cut. Oh, what
Or
did I
any of
learn
your
about
others
myself in
if you
writing
feel they've
Final
been
Cut? I don't
mentioned.
know. Can I pass? With writing before I go to sleep, I think actually the same as Anna. I think I learned. I think I already knew I was gay, so it wasn't that. But I think the same. I sort of learned that actually, despite the negativity that you hear, actually I am a writer, and it's what I wanted to do. And although it was wonderful that it went on to be successful, the process of writing that book taught me that actually if that book hadn't been successful, I was going to carry on. It was what I did. It was my kind of happy place. It was how I like to express myself. So it taught me something quite fundamental about myself, and also to kind of move towards the fear rather than away from it. Maybe Final Cut taught me that actually. Yeah, that's something that I have learned over the course of writing Final Cut, but it's, yeah, the fear is possibly where the exciting stuff is. And if you don't, I think if you don't feel slightly or even hugely out of your depth, you're probably not in deep enough. So yeah.
3 mega novels in, Steve, you still feel the fear?
Oh God, yeah. It gets worse. I'm sorry if this is a shock, but it doesn't get easier. Because I think I don't know. I think when I wrote Before I Go to Sleep, I think I had this idea that you learn how to write a novel,
Mm-hmm.
and that it's like riding a bike. So once you've learned how to do it, you can do it. So
Right.
go and ride your bike. But actually, what possibly what I learned with writing Final Cut is you learn how to write the book that you're writing.
Yeah.
And each book demands something slightly different of you, which I think is what I was saying earlier about I started off not being a planner and now I'm a planner, and it was just each book demanded something slightly different. And so with the book I'm writing now, I hand wrote the first draft, which I never thought I would do, but that seemed to be what worked for that book. So yeah, it doesn't get easier, it gets different, if that makes sense.
That's better than saying it gets harder, because I am worried about Anna now.
That's really helpful advice, because I keep doing things and thinking like, why isn't this working the same way that it did the first time? And actually,
Yeah.
it's good to know that it's never going to work. So.
No. I think you have to remain open to experimenting with your own process. And not being too rigidly fixed to, well, this is how I do it, this is how I work, because it does change. So that would be my take home.
I'm just going to look back to planning and plotting, because Keith Young would like to know if either of you, do you know the ending before you actually write it?
Oh, that's a really good question. Actually, with Tallbones, it was one of the classes that we did with the Curtis Brown course was writing the ending of the novel, and they were like, "Don't worry if you don't use it; it's not a big deal." But that was the week that Andrew Michael Hurley was the guest tutor, and I love him so much that I wanted to impress him so badly that I wrote the ending to the book, and it's the same ending which is in the book now. So like I really put my heart into the ending, and so I'm really glad that it's the one that yeah, I liked it a lot. So it was actually really helpful to have me working towards it the whole time. But that's not been the case with this novel. I wish Andrew Michael Hurley would read this one so that I could have something good to write.
I'm sure he would now.
I was going to say, drop him an email, Anna. I'm sure he'd be open to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know the ending to this next one. But that is like you were saying, the not knowing is very exciting as well. Getting to figure that out.
Okay, this is a really great one. Jackie McLean would like to know, how do you keep track in your head of all the twists and turns of a complex plot? Steve, yours are quite notoriously twisty and turny. So how do you keep track of them?
There's a lot of swearing when I'm redrafting. Especially with Before I Go to Sleep, that was a particularly tricky one, because the structure of the book, it means that because she's reading it, she hasn't, for those that haven't read it, she's reading a diary, and it's a diary she's keeping, and it's her only source of memory.
Yeah.
It meant that if I changed anything at all, I had to make sure that wasn't then referred. If I took something out, it couldn't then be referred to later, because she wouldn't know it.
Yeah.
So it was incredibly. There was a lot of swearing and a lot of, oh no, this whole thing doesn't work now because I've got to put that. It just was a nightmare. Yeah. So I'm trying to write a more simple book but I don't seem to be able to. I just keep a note. I do keep a notebook of like, this is like what the character knows at this point, and this is. I try and always keep in my mind of what the character knows, what the character's feeling, what the reader knows, which is often sometimes different, and what I would like the reader to be thinking. But yeah, a lot of it happens in the redraft. It's when I read through and think, oh no, that doesn't quite work because of X, Y, or Z. So yeah.
And I know you said you wrote Before I Go to Sleep on some of the course you did. How long roughly did it take to write that?
Well, it was super quick, which I now realise, having taken 5 years for all my subsequent novels. Yeah, so I wrote the course started in February, and I finished the first draft in August. Nice. So that's what, 6 months?
Yeah.
There was a lot of work to do. I mean, the first draft was the structure was kind of more or less there, but I think it did change. It was more than just let's change a few words and correct a few spelling mistakes. There was a big structural edit, which took me another however many months, but basically beginning to end was about 14 months, which I now realize is super quick for me. Yeah. Yeah.
And how did you keep in your mind, you're going from viewpoint to viewpoint, like Steve says, to one character who knows one thing and others who don't know that thing. How do you manage to keep track of all of that?
Kind of similar, to be honest. I keep a lot of notes about like who knows what, and like Steve was saying, what characters know, but what you want the reader to know as well. And I think that's what I really love about the multiple viewpoints angle as well, is that you can have certain characters know certain things and other characters know other things, and have them reveal things about one another, which I really love. But mostly it's my editor. She goes through it afterwards, and I'm like, don't worry, I've got everything, I figured it all out. And she's like, you have a character change age like 3 times in like one chapter, and I'm like, oh, okay.
It's the copy editor as well. I don't know if you experience this, but especially with Before I Go to Sleep, my copy editor picked up on so much stuff. Like I'd even included the words Van de Graaff generator, meaning the physics, the piece of scientific equipment, but I'd spelled it like the band spell it. But I didn't even know it was different. And I had flowers smelling that actually don't smell. My copy editor saved my bacon so many times in that book.
Yeah, I would definitely have some interesting notes back about body decomposition and other great stuff that you definitely want to talk about first thing in the morning over breakfast.
Delightful. Rose Cullen would like to know, how do you feel about your antagonists? Do you ever feel drawn to them? Anna?
I guess that's a good question. I think, without giving too much away, I guess Tall Bones has quite a lot of antagonists, and kind of the town as a whole is kind of an antagonist, but the primary antagonist is definitely I guess there's not, but certain characters in that novel, I think it's not so much that I feel, I love villains and antagonists in the stuff that I read, and watch. But I think in this novel, I wasn't particularly drawn to them, but I did really enjoy writing them because I guess like I see them as being kind of victims of the society that they live in, I guess. Like that I had a pretty bad time in America, but and due to people like this, people very, very narrow-minded people, very aggressive. But I think that they are very much the victim of their country's political agenda, and so it was interesting to write that and to kind of. I think it helped me understand my own experience more, trying to understand the experiences of these people and to realize that actually like they're just regular human beings and the way they are is not, they have responsibility for their behavior, sure, but like it's not necessarily something to take personally. And I did find that quite healing to write about characters like that and to understand those kinds of people more.
I think it's really actually magnanimous of you to say that, if they've made your life so difficult, to actually be big enough to say that, you know, yes, they are responsible, but they do also have other facets to them and stuff. I think that's really, really kind and generous of you. And Steve, antagonists.
Yeah, I think the same. I think if you don't have some, if not sympathy, at least some understanding of why your antagonist is behaving the way they do, and what's taken them to that point, I think you risk writing a really one-dimensional baddie, basically, with, you know, and I think that's kind of boring to read. It's like, you know, I mean, Darth Vader, for example, is such a good antagonist because there's a hope of redemption. Because there is some good, you know, to quote the film, there is some good in him, you know, and it's so that's what makes it really interesting to watch. Which road will he take? And I think so. You have to kind of understand. So in my books, yeah, I understand where my characters came from and so I do have some sympathy with them. Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of have to, or else, yeah, like I say, you end up writing really boring one-dimensional villains who just are evil for evil's sake. And I don't think many people are like that. I think everyone is the hero of their own story, and everyone thinks that they're the goodies, don't they? That they're, you know, in Anna's book, for example, the townspeople think that they're defending their way of life from this terrible, thing that's happening in their midst, and that's their perception. So everyone thinks they're the goodie.
Yeah. We've had a couple of people, so Linda Hutchison and Nikki O'Shea would like to know what your favourite book is, just generally. But Nikki would also like to know what you've taken from your favourite book to your own writing. So Anna, can I come to you?
Oh, my favourite book, I always say, is The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov, which I just really love that book. I'm a huge fan of like classic Russian literature, and but that one in particular, it's just the sort of wackiness of it, and this story of this very plucky woman going after the devil, and there's a talking cat. What's not to love about that? It's great for the way that it gives you this, you know, brilliant satire of Soviet society, but it's also just a really entertaining read, and I love the sense of humor in it a lot. And I think definitely it taught me the kind of female characters that I wanted to write, for sure. These sort of women who have a lot of flaws but are still very you still end up rooting for them, women that you are really behind and that you enjoy reading about.
And how about you, Steve?
My favourite book sort of changes all the time. It changes day to day. I mean, at the moment, I'm tempted to say Tall Bones, actually, but but the one I keep going back to is probably Rebecca. I just think it's and to answer the question about what I have taken from it, I think it's the perfect example of what I try to do. I'm not in any way trying to say I've you know reached those heights, but which is to write a story that's very gripping and exciting and has twists and turns and it's a page turner and all those kind of cliched phrases, but actually it's entertaining basically, but it's also really, really well written with deep characters that've got things, you know, something to say and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a good example of, you know, you can have a book doesn't have to either be fun and entertaining or well written. It can be both.
Absolutely.
So that, and I think, you know, I'll say Rebecca.
I think what both of you have done with the settings, particularly in your novels, you've certainly created that atmosphere that is in books like Rebecca, and created the tension through the setting as well as the characters, and they're just brilliant reads. Nikki, what you would also like to know, how many drafts do you write before you're happy for anyone else to see it? Steve?
6,005. No, I don't know. As many as it takes. It's difficult because the way I write, it's difficult to say where one draft ends and another one begins. Because I tinker a lot, and it's like, at what point does tinkering mean? Oh, actually, it's kind of a new draft now. I am a redrafter. I am somebody who, you know, I'm not. Again, in my book club recently, I think it was Joseph Knox said that by the time he's finished a book, he as in writing the book, it's pretty much done. And that's not my case. My first drafts are pretty, there's something there, but it's a mess. So yeah, how many? It probably averages about 6, I would say. And yeah, and maybe 4 before I let someone see it. So the last 2 are like, ooh, my editor going, okay.
Interesting.
Needs a bit more work. Yeah, so let's say 4 maybe.
Anna?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I like to redraft stuff kind of as I'm going quite a lot, which definitely makes it a slower process. I think my poor mum must have read about 7 or 8 drafts of Tall Bones before it was sent to my agent, and she's reading the book, the actual proper book now for the first time, and she keeps sort of messaging me to say like, oh, this bit's new, I don't remember this bit. It's really sweet. But yeah, I think I don't know, I think it really just depends on what I'm working on. I am excited to finish the new book that I'm writing now, so I think as soon as I have a draft of it, I will at least show it to my girlfriend, who I'm really looking forward to her reading it. So that will be something before I send it to anyone else. I guess I want to get her opinion on it.
That's excellent. And as a mum, I will just say that is kind of our job, to just read your multiple drafts. Honestly, I look forward to the day my son can do that.
I have to echo that. I'm pretty sure my mum's listening in, and she has read everything I've written so many times. And if I was to dare to show to somebody else first, I think she would probably disown me. She very much sees it as her job.
And rightly so. It's the least you can do, sure, after your work. Have either of you suffered from writer's block?
Yes.
How did you get over it, Anna?
How did I? I think that I did have kind of like second novel blues, I think, when I was starting writing. I was so excited to begin with, and then lockdown happened, and I was kind of like, oh great, more time to spend with me, my favorite person. And so it was kind of grim, and I wasn't in like the best place for it. I think like being stuck inside while there was a deadly virus on the loose wasn't super conducive to creativity. But I think it was really just going back to the stuff that I know inspires me, like rereading books that I know I loved, rewatching a lot of television that I know really inspired me when I was writing Tall Bones, and remembering the stuff that makes me want to tell stories and makes me think about the kind of settings I'm writing and how I want to evoke that. And so yeah, I'm back in the saddle again, so that's good. But yeah, definitely took a little while to get there.
Steve, I didn't quite catch your response. Was it a non-committal, or was it yes, I have suffered from writing? Oh no, yeah, definitely. I think it's part and parcel. I think that's part of the job. And for me, I used to try and push through it, and I realised that's probably the worst thing for me anyway to do. because I used to think, well, if I was a plumber, you don't have plumber's block. You have to do the job. It's a job. You have to do it. So I used to approach it like that, but that's actually not. It's counterproductive for me. I try and listen to what. I try and understand why I'm blocked and what is the book telling me. What's not working? You know, is there a reason why suddenly I don't want to re-enter this world, or I don't want to kind of write this scene? Is it because it's the wrong scene, or I'm trying to force the characters to do something that they shouldn't be doing, or something like that? But sometimes it's I really enjoy street photography, so I will go out and take some photos, and I think there's something about that. I think because it's still exercising the creative part of my brain, but in a very different way. It's not putting words on the page. It's a very sort of like, and it's also still still a narrative medium. I think I'm trying to tell a story through pictures, but because just because it's something that's engaging me, but isn't the work I'm doing, sometimes when I get back to the desk, I'm sort of like, this is what I should be doing now. This is what I should be writing. So there's something about doing something else that's creative. And that's also, that for me, that's actively creative rather than just like passively creative. Seems to work. But I think it's just part of the process. I don't think anybody doesn't suffer writer's block. I mean, whatever you want to call it, I don't know anyone that doesn't experience it.
Yeah, I'm probably going to hideously misquote Agatha Christie now, but I think she used to say something like she always got her best plotting done when she was washing the dishes. So it is something about it's a different activity and just lets your mind wander. Steve, I can't let tonight go past without chatting to you about adaptation to screen before I go to sleep. Were you, because I've heard different people, different writers talk about how involved they have been in the adaptations. So Gillian Flynn, for example, was, I think, the screenwriter of the Gone Girl film.
She was, yeah.
Yeah, but then conversely, I think it was Paula Hawkins I saw say once that was signed, it was passed over and it was nothing to do with me. I'll take the money and go, kind of thing. Did you visit the set? Were you involved in it at all?
Yeah. Well, yeah, yes, I visited the set. Was I involved? Not really.
Okay.
Which was the best of both worlds for me, because it meant that I didn't write the screenplay. I didn't have anything. I was very lucky in that Rowan, who did write the screenplay and directed the film, and Liza, who was the producer, were very keen for me to be involved and to feel included. But I didn't have any. So basically, I didn't really have a job to do, which is great because I could just go along and sort of. And it was the most surreal experience to just kind of sit in a studio in was it Pine? No, Twickenham, and be in a room that had started off in my head, seeing Nicole Kidman, you know, not just an actor, but Nicole Kidman inhabiting a character that I'd invented. It was the most surreal, strange experience. So I could, but because I hadn't actually got a job to do, I wasn't having to write it or edit it or do anything really. I could just enjoy it. So I was very lucky in that respect. And I also thought it kind of gave me plausible deniability, because I thought if the film isn't very good, I could just say, well, it had nothing to do with me. And if the film is good, and I think it is good, I could go, well, yeah, I wrote the book. So it's the best of both worlds. So that's what I would recommend to any author. Unless, I mean, you know, if you have a burning desire to write a screenplay, but I think once I'd written the book, I'd sort of done with it. I didn't really want to re-enter that story or that world. So even if they'd asked me to write this, which they didn't, I wouldn't have wanted to write the screenplay.
Anna, I can really see yours on the screen. I can see it through a sepia haze, sort of True Detective-esque. It's just ripe for it, honestly.
A girl can dream.
Well, I'll dream along with you because I don't see it on the screen. I've read it on the
too, because I'd watch it definitely.
Yeah.
It does. It screams out. This should be on the TV. I think it's a really great TV show.
Agreed.
We'll all keep our fingers crossed.
Thanks, guys.
And finally, for the pair of you, what's next? So, Anna, can you tell us anything about what's coming up next for you?
Yeah, so I'm working on a new book, which is due soon. So I am working working very hard to get that finished. It's another mystery set in a small town, and this time it's set in Texas in the 70s, and it's about a murder within a family where the rest of the family is sort of suspects in the murder, which I'm having a lot of fun. So I used to live in Texas as well, so I'm having a lot of fun kind of revisiting that, and I'm writing about a place that was hugely impactful on me, but also I get to listen to a lot of 70s music, so I'm having a very groovy time.
And Steve?
Yeah, I'm editing my new book, which I don't really like talking about the story or
Very wise.
anything, but it is another psychological thriller. And yeah, hopefully it will be out next year.
So it's not a 5-year wait this time?
No, for various reasons that I don't want to go into.
No.
Things are improving on that.
Excellent.
on that front.
Excellent. Well, I would just like to thank both of you very much for this wonderful discussion. It's been a real joy to talk to both of you this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. And I'd just like to thank our audience as well for their questions, and remind everybody that if you would like to be in the draw to win a copy, please email us with the title of a crime novel based on the place you live with a couple of line synopsis, and we will pick probably the funniest ones. So everybody, huge round of applause for lovely Anna Bailey and fantastic S.J. Watson.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Hi.
So that's it for this month's Bay Tales Live. I hope you've enjoyed the show. We'll be announcing our end of May show, where we'll be headlining one of the most respected British authors writing today, a master of the novel, the short story, and responsible for one of the best non-fiction crime books I've read in recent years. So to make sure you don't miss out, visit our website, keep an eye on our events page, where you can still book for tomorrow's virtual launch party of Russ's book. Visit our contact page where you can sign up to our newsletter to make sure you get all the latest news. Follow us on social. Yeah, we hope you'll join us on the next one. Vic?
Just a huge thank you to everyone. So thank you to Simon. Thank you to all of you for being here, to our guest reviewer, Noelle Holton, our writer of the month, Leah Middleton, and the fantastic Anna Bailey and S.J. Watson, who I could have spoken to all night. And also the lovely Anna Levine, who provided our break music this evening. Hate doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you are enjoying our shows and you do feel you are able to, please visit this website, theco-fi.com/baytales, to drop whatever you can into our donations. It is much appreciated, but we know that not everybody can. So if you can't visit us tomorrow night for Russ Thomas's launch of Nighthawking, why the hell can't you? But also, if you can't, we'll see you in May. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.